Hey, I made a video, I don't know, a couple weeks ago maybe, giving training on how to defeat Pope haters using World War II close quarter combatives, Marine Corps raiders, throat strikes, taking out the knee, and it was all offensive. Be on the offense, how to attack these Pope haters before they even get a chance to throw their first punch at you. And this is all figuratively, these are analogies, because we battle not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual principalities. So we're in a spiritual fight. And the enemy, Satan, always goes after the leader. Whenever you're in a fight in war, they always go after the leader. So I told you I was going to do one with judo techniques, again, figuratively. So I'm going to show you when someone comes at you with an accusation, and I've done this with, Protestants, but this specific video is for people who attack Pope Francis, the most attacked Christian in my lifetime. When they attack him with lies and slanders and mischaracterizing what he said, in judo, if someone comes at you, you use their own body weight to throw them. So like, I told you I'm a jack of all styles, but a master of none. I took judo. I wanted to see how it would work against basic, common street fighting moves. I always relate everything to a real street fight. So I bum rushed this brown belt, bum rush, take him down, pound him and ground him. So I bum rushed him, and he flipped me so fast because I ran at him so fast. If I would have ran at him slower and took my time, he probably wouldn't be able to get me, but he used my momentum. I went through the air. I was like, what the heck? And if you're an experienced judoka, you know how to land. But I wasn't experienced. I didn't know how to land. That hurt. And even if you know how to land, it hurts, just not as bad. So today I'm going to show you how to use the same arguments. And I'm going to give you a little white belt throw. That'll, ring their bell. But my second throw is going to take them and slam them on the concrete where their head is going to split open on the curb. Figuratively. This is an analogy. So there's so many arguments, so many lies about Pope Francis. I had like a list of 20, and this video would be like 20 hours if I did them all. But I'm going to give you one to show you how we do this flip. So the argument is Pope Francis is going to allow gay seminarians. So they get this from an Italian bishop's document on allowance, requirements for seminarians. Before I read that, let me tell you what it was in response to. So he approved these new guidelines for the Italian bishops. And it was in response to what he said to these Italian bishops. In 2018, Pope Francis said to these Italian bishops, and I found this in a liberal rag, because I always read every side of every story to see what people are saying. So I read this in a secular liberal rag website, and the title was Pope Francis Goes Full Homophobe. So again, the Italians leak a lot. For the country where the mafia was born, these guys leak a lot. So it was leaked, and the Vatican admitted it. So Pope Francis said to the bishops, do not allow a seminarian, if he has a hint of femininity. Then just last year, these same Italian bishops leaked, and the Vatican had apologized twice, like weeks apart, because Pope Francis said, do not allow faggots into the seminary. He said it twice. So the bishops are like, okay, let's make sure we understand what the rules are here. Pope Francis is coming out hard against homosexual seminarians. You see, the truth is Pope Francis despises, hates the sin of homosexuality as much as he loves the sinner. And the mainstream media will ignore his hatred towards the sin of homosexuality and focus on his love of the sinner. And YouTubers who hate for various reasons, and we'll get into that later, who hate Pope Francis, will focus on his love for the sinner and take what he says out of context to make it seem like he's not telling them to go sin no more. And the reason Pope Francis hates the sin of homosexuality, he told those Italian bishops, you cannot let a seminarian in with a hint of femininity because our children are too precious. And we are going to defeat this child sex abuse problem, because he knew that the report on the child sex abuse scandal, the worst crisis in church history, was a result of homosexual men. Like 99.9% of them were homosexual men. So Pope Francis did everything in his power to keep them out. And what was the result? Well, Jason Berry, the journalist who uncovered the sexual abuse scandal, I guess back in the 80s maybe, which they actually based the movie Spotlight on his investigative report. I think he's from like the Boston Globe or something. He's a writer, he's an investigative reporter. He recently came out and said Pope Francis has ended this sexual abuse crisis because he is leaps and bounds above his predecessors in attacking this problem. And, you know, being a secular journalist, he didn't talk about the homosexual, stuff. He just said he put in a lot of safeguards. And the fact is, yes, although many YouTubers want to say we're in a crisis, the worst crisis ever, Pope Francis might eliminate the Latin Mass, or he might restrict it. The worst crisis was abusing little children. If you don't think that was the worst crisis in the church, you're part of the problem. And here are this is from The Truth About Clergy Sex Abuse by Bill Donahue. He gives us statistics. I think this is just the United States, but the same statistics are the same throughout the world since 2012, since Pope Francis has been Pope. These are allegations of priests abusing children. 2012, 6. 2013, 7. These are allegations. Some of them it's the same priest like 6 times. I forget what years, but you can get the book and read it. 2013, 7. 2014, 6. 2015, 7. 2016, 2. 2017, 6. 2018, 3. 2019, 8. And it ends in 2019, but I've read statistics online, and I remember reading in 2023, there were only 3 allegations against, and that's 3 too many. But compared to society, the Chicago public school system, one city's public school system, had over 3,000 that same year, 2023, teachers abusing children. And Baz Tadjidovin, Billy Graham's grandson, who's an expert in child abuse, he ran the child sex abuse department in the state of Florida. He was a state attorney general, state prosecutor rather. Now he does it in private practice, specializing in religious abuse. He said even at the height of the Catholic sex abuse, before Pope Francis was Pope, back in like the 60s, 70s, and 80s when it was really going horrible, he said Protestant churches have 2 to 3 times more, but the media focuses on the Catholic Church because that's the church Jesus started. That's the church they hate the most. So even Baz Tadjidovin, and he's still devout evangelical, admits this. But since Pope Francis has been Pope, he's ended this. So why? Oh, and another thing these Pope haters ignore. Again, they focus on how he's very forgiving and very merciful towards sinners. Well, another thing they ignore is his first 2 excommunications. The first priest he executed, Father Greg Reynolds, for being a supporter of gay rights. The second priest was Father Roberto Francis Daniel from Brazil, for saying homosexuality isn't a sin. These were his first 2 priests he excommunicated. He hates the sin of homosexuality. In fact, in January 2023, CBS News asked him, is homosexuality a sin? And he said, yes, homosexuality is a sin, but homosexuality is not a crime. So everybody ran with Pope Francis said homosexuality is not a crime. Even Taylor Marshall had this big video with a lot of views saying Pope Francis says homosexuality is not a crime. But he first said homosexuality is a sin, but it's not a crime, because he was addressing Muslim leaders. He was having a meeting with them because, in Iran, in Gaza, in Saudi Arabia, they kill homosexuals. They throw you off roofs. They burn you alive. He's saying it's not a crime. You shouldn't be killing people because they're homosexuals. But it is a sin. And so they try and use, again, and then they'll bring up, oh, well, he wants to bless same-sex unions. When again, in 2021, March of 2021, Pope Francis signed a document that states the church cannot bless same-sex unions because God cannot bless sin. They're like, well, Fiducia Supplicans says you can bless same-sex couples. Again, this was a response to his harsh criticism of the homosexual lifestyle. They're like, well, can we help out homosexuals that come to our church? And so it starts out for like the first 30 chapters, first 30 paragraphs, explaining why the church cannot bless same-sex unions, why the church can't bless anything that might be confused for a same-sex union. And then it goes on, I think it's paragraph 31, says, however, if a couple comes to you in an irregular marriage, and that could be an unmarried couple living together or a same-sex couple, you can bless them with the blessing of actual grace. And a lot of these guys that accuse Pope Francis know what actual grace is. Actual grace is a blessing to give you grace to repent from your sin. And it says you can give that to them if they don't try to make their relationship legitimate. They don't come and they know their relationship is wrong. They don't legitimize their relationship. And they're destitute and beg for help. That's the big thing that everybody's saying, oh, he's saying you can bless same-sex couples, and conflating that with giving your blessing, like confirming and praising someone. Yes, you have my blessing that you're in a same-sex couple, And I understand my Protestant brothers don't understand this, but my Catholic brothers who lie about the Pope, they should know better. And I think they do know better. They lie. It's the same blessing at the end of Mass when he blesses everybody. And I'm sure there's a lot of sinners in there that are in irregular marriages, and everybody gets a blessing. It's a blessing of actual grace to help us all repent, to receive the grace to repent, because we can't repent in our own strength. We need the grace of God to repent. So, now, why? Just want to make sure. I always forget a bunch of notes. So why do the critics do this? Well, I told you in a few videos that Pope Francis's critics use the strategies of the left to, destroy the man's character, just make Pope Francis look like a liberal. So anything he says will be taken the wrong way. The issue is never the issue. Of course, the issue is in Pope Francis. It wasn't Pope St. John Paul II who the same people attack. The issue is these people hate Vatican II and they hate the ordinary Mass. Okay, but number 3, another tactic of the left in Saul Alinsky's communist book, Rules for Radicals, he said, accuse your enemies of what you do. It's called projecting. So one of Pope Francis's biggest critics is excommunicated Carlo Maria Vigano. And he accuses Pope Francis of being too friendly with homosexuals and protecting homosexuals. But here are the facts. In 2014, Pope Benedict put Vigano in charge of protecting children. In charge of watching, I'm getting ahead of myself, in charge of watching McCarrick. There were reports that he was a homosexual and he was having sexual encounters with other men. So Pope Benedict said, watch him, don't let him leave Washington, D.C. Well, when a report came out in 2018 that on McCarrick, it had pictures, videos, statements, travel receipts, that Vigano did not obey Pope Benedict and keep McCarrick in Washington, D.C. He actually traveled the world with his friend, and reports said they were very friendly, Vigano and this homosexual man, McCarrick. Very friendly. There's pictures of them wine and dine, drinking wine, partying all over the world. McCarrick introducing them to all his rich friends throughout the world. All these elitists that McCarrick knew. Vigano was by his side with his homo friend, McCarrick, partying. And then right before the report came out, Vigano seen the report, because out of courtesy, that's what the church did. So he turned around and flipped the script and accused Pope Francis of doing what he does. And he accused Pope Francis of covering for McCarrick, when Pope Francis was the Pope who laicized McCarrick after the report. He had to wait for the report. Just kind of like if you ever watched The Warriors back in the 80s, you know, when that crazy psychotic guy shot Cyrus, and then everybody was looking around, and the Cyrus knew that the Warrior gang saw him do it. So like a little weasel, he's like, the warrior killed Cyrus. That was Vigano, the weasel. Pope Francis was protecting McCarrick. But this isn't the first time he protected a homo friend of his. You go back to 2014, Bishop Niestedt in Minnesota, I believe. Bishop Niestedt was accused of harassing young priests, seminaries, sleeping with other men. And it was Bishop Pichet and Bishop Kazo. Man, I thought I wrote all this down. Bishop Kazo, and I'm sorry, there's so much here. But Bishop Kazo and Bishop Pichet had gotten dozens of affidavits, people signing on the oath that this Bishop Niestedt was was sexually harassing them, sleeping with men. He was a homo. Turns out he's friends with Vigano. So Vigano has two homo friends. And Bishop Pichet, Bishop Kazo said Vigano shut it down, and they were very angry. He shut this investigation down. Later on, it was just obvious that this was a cover-up, and Bishop Niestedt resigned. So it's two homo friends that Vigano covered up for. And you know, everyone deserves dignity and respect. But I don't know too many straight guys that have two homosexual friends and that would cover up for them. You know, whatever, I don't know. Just seems a little weird to me. So again, he was projecting. He covered up for two homosexual priests, and he's projecting on Pope Francis, who's calling homosexual faggots, saying don't let homosexuals in the seminary. Kind of seems like he's projecting. Now, getting back to that document by the Italians, it came out in the mainstream media, and where the heck is it? Came out in the mainstream media that the Italian bishops are going to allow gay seminarians, and Pope Francis approved it. And within 24 hours, those bishops said, that's a lie. This is fake news. We didn't change anything. We just wanted to make sure that Pope Francis didn't want us to change anything, because Pope Benedict and even Pope St. John Paul II before them said we could allow people in that had like passing thought of being gay when they were like a teenager, but haven't ever practiced it and haven't had a thought about it in 3 years, and they take a vow of celibacy. But, you know, Pope Francis was making it sound like, dude, if they even thought about it for a second, don't let them in. So I don't have the Italian version. I think Michael Lofton did a video where he got the translation. I couldn't find the Italian translation, but I read it. And it's almost word for word of what Pope Benedict had the church follow in 2005. So I'm going to read Pope Benedict's. But according to the Italian bishops, they didn't change anything. Maybe the wording was a little bit different. But like I said, if you watch Michael Lofton's video on it, you can see it means the same thing. And this is what the church says. In the light of such teaching, this dicastery, in accord with the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments, believe it is necessary to state clearly that the church, while profoundly respecting the persons in question, cannot admit to the seminary or to holy orders those who practice homosexuality, present deep-seated homosexual tendencies, or support the so-called gay culture. That part's almost word for word from what the Italians wrote. Such persons, in fact, find themselves in a situation that gravely hinders them from relating correctly to men and women. One must in no way overlook the negative consequences that can derive from the ordination of persons with deep-seated homosexual tendencies. This is Pope Benedict, and the Italian bishops are almost word for word. Different, however, would be the case in which one were dealing with homosexual tendencies that were only the expression of a transitory problem. And what would change, what the bishop said, was a fleeting thought. But basically the same thing. Transition. For example, that of an adolescent, not yet superseded. Nevertheless, such tendencies must be clearly overcome at least 3 years before ordination to the diaconate. So you can't be someone who supports the gay community. You can't be someone who's ever actively gay. But if you had a fleeting, if you were 13 years old and you thought about it for a moment and you've overcome it, those could be admitted. And the fake news said, Pope Francis is allowing gay seminarians. And the fake YouTubers that lie about Pope Francis said, Pope Francis is allowing gays. You know? No, gay is not okay. If you're gay, you cannot stay a priest, according to Pope Francis and according to the church for 2,000 years. So that's the white belt flip. Oh man, what's the black belt flip? What's going to smash them on their head? Well, Vigano recently, out of the blue, kind of even the biggest Pope haters were kind of like shocked about this. Accused Pope Francis of abusing children himself, being a child sex abuser. With no evidence, he just said it because whatever he says, his YouTube sycophants will play it on their YouTube channel and it'll get traction. And a lot of people will believe it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of gullible people that believe Vigano's lies. But here's the projection. You see, Vigano left the church and joined a cult called the SSPX Resistance. Not the same as the SSPX, the SSPX Resistance. And according to Father Chisel, and I did a video on it, Vigano was reordained by Bishop Richard Williamson, who was twice excommunicated. Vigano was only excommunicated once. But Richard Williamson, who passed away, was twice excommunicated. And he reordained Carlo Vigano as a bishop because this cult believes that since 1958, there hasn't been a valid pope and there hasn't been any valid baptism. So this cult also rebaptized Catholics, which is a mortal sin, and they reordained priests and bishops. So Vigano joins this cult, and lo and behold, comes out a renegade Catholic bishop who has been excommunicated twice is being accused of harboring clergy accused of sexual abuse. 2 priests were found taking refuge in Broadstairs, Kent, where Society of St. Pius clergyman Richard Williamson leads the SSPX Resistance movement. Now, that's not to be confused in about the same time, or maybe a year later, in France, a real SSPX, not a resistance, a real SSPX priest pleaded guilty to abusing 21 little boys. So there's a lot of problem in these breakaway cults because they're not under the authority of a real bishop, so they kind of hide. They go there to hide. And I'm not saying all these SSPX are abusers, but that's a place they hide. So maybe Vigano is projecting this lie on the Pope Francis, just like he projected the lie that he protected homosexual priests when he was the one, because Richard Williamson has a record of this too. Back when Marcel Lefebvre, excommunicated Bishop Marcel Lefebvre, was alive, several priests went up to him and told him about a seminary student, Carlos Urigauti, and said, hey, this guy is a child sex abuser. He's a homosexuality. You got to throw this guy out. Well, according to the reports, Christine Niles has some great reporting on this. If you want to check out all the facts, the dates, the names. According to all the reports, Lefebvre was another guy very fond of a homosexual child abuser, for what that's worth, you know. It's kind of weird to me, but, you know. Lefebvre was very fond of Carlos Urigauti and ordained him anyway. In fact, fired those people in the school, because he was in a school, fired the people in the school that accused him. But, you know, he wanted to protect his friend, homosexual Carlos Urigauti. So he told Bishop Williamson, watch him like a hawk. And Bishop Williamson somehow missed all the abuse. He eventually got in trouble with the police and he was excommunicated as a Catholic priest. So Williamson has a record of protecting homo child abusers. And then in his new cult, the SSPX Resistance, they're obviously protecting child homosexuals. So isn't it kind of strange that out of the blue, Vigano would project that onto Pope Francis? So that's the judo flip that cracks their head. That Vigano is accusing Pope Francis of being a child abuser because Vigano is probably a child abuser. And you say, oh, this man's character. This man's character, I looked into this man's character. An Italian court found Carlo Maria Vigano guilty of stealing, a bishop stealing $2 million from his brother, who's also a priest, Father Lorenzo. A Swiss court found Carlo Maria Vigano guilty of stealing $300,000 from his sister. This is this man's character, other than lying and being friends with some pretty bad people. And his brother, Father Lorenzo, said that his brother was a liar, a compulsive liar. Said he actually lied to Pope Benedict and told him he needed to stay in Rome because he had to take care of me when I was in Chicago. And I hadn't seen my brother in 10 years. Me and my brother don't get along. He said he's a liar. And he said my brother would always tell me, don't let people know how rich we are. I want to be a cardinal, and this will not look good. Yes, did you know Vigano is worth $30 million? Yeah, excommunicated Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano is worth $30 million. $30 million. It's kind of odd for a bishop to be worth $30 million. But he inherited a lot of that. I think he inherited all of it, honestly. But he's a very wealthy man. He's a multimillionaire. So Vigano is a viper. He's a viper who attacks the Holy Father. He's a viper. So why do popular Catholic YouTubers always prop him up and repeat what he says and make him out like he's a saint? Well, I have my opinion, and I have people that email me, but they're afraid because they're like, this cult is dangerous. They'll hurt me. I don't give my name, but you can tell them what I tell you. So it's going to be anonymous, just like Vigano's anonymous statements. But first of all, these YouTubers love Vigano because the issue is never the issue. See, these YouTubers hate, the ones that hate Pope Francis, they really don't care about Pope Francis. They'll do the same thing to the next Pope, whether he's conservative in their eyes or liberal. They hate Vatican II, and they hate the ordinary Mass. So until a Pope cancels the ordinary Mass and says all we can do is the TLM Mass, until the Pope says Vatican II is invalid, they're not going to be happy. So you know how the old saying, an enemy of my enemy is my friend. So even though they know Vigano's a scoundrel, they put him on because they're saying what they want people to believe. That's my opinion. But my emails are saying Vigano is so freaking rich, he donates a ton of money to these people in return for free publicity. So that's the judo flip. The worst critic of Pope Francis, excommunicated Carlo Maria Vigano, accuses Pope Francis of being a child abuser and hiding child abusers, is in a cult that hides child abusers. The man who accuses Pope Francis of being too friendly with homosexuals is very friendly with homosexuals. You know, I always say, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So God bless, stay Catholic, use this evidence, but use it in love. Because most people, they're not evil and vile and reprehensible like Carlo Vigano, but they think he's a good guy, so they're going to defend him and they're going to get mad at you. So present the evidence truthfully and lovingly, and stay Catholic.